Horror content online is growing at an alarming rate, and it is a wonderful time to love horror and watch spooky stuff on YouTube or whatever website, TikTok, whatever you want, really. Everybody's getting into it. But I always find it funny that the scariest content that we can possibly have for people are often the ones that are innocuous and not really made for horror at all. Sometimes they can have an innocent purpose behind them, something that they otherwise thought would be good for certain kinds of people, but for others it's downright terrifying, and there's one channel that fits that bill more than anything I've ever seen, and I can't believe I'm saying this, but there's a certain kind of kids content that exists right now that scares me more than any horror series that I've seen pretty much this entire year, and it sucks. There's this channel called the Pentamax that on first glance looks pretty innocent enough, right? It's kids content made for, well, kids, and it's supposedly like just a bunch of videos that show railroad crossing signs with interesting sounds or weird designs that should engage the brains of 2-year-old kids that don't know anything about, I don't know, politics. When you actually watch the videos, they're not great, actually. Why the fuck is this so scary? This is actually genuinely unnerving, and this is, yes, I'm not even kidding, made for YouTube Kids. Now we can see with the Pentamax that their entire channel wasn't always like this. They kind of always had some sort of, well, I guess genuine vibe behind their entire channel. They did show real footage of railroad signs, and maybe they were trying to show their interest in trains or railways or something like that to kids, and you know, these are very relaxing videos when you actually watch them. They're not really that, I don't know, scary. Honestly, they're just innocent videos of signs in Japan, and it's nice, it's calming. Except for the fact that somewhere in the mid-2020s, he just completely changed focus and just wanted to scare the fucking shit out of anyone that saw their content. It's nightmare fuel. Why is this a thing? Now, the Pentamax is somewhat of a mystery. It is a Japanese channel that started sometime 11 years ago, and from the description of the channel, it seems to be just someone who's very interested in locomotives and such, that happen to have come across these kinds of signs and interesting railroads with their family as they traveled across Japan and all that stuff. And while, like I said, the older videos were a lot more calming, as you can see here, you know, it's nice, it's cute, it's something that you can definitely show a kid, and it's like, it reminds me of those old commercials back in the 2000s when you remember that commercial where they try to sell kids into like getting into trains and stuff, and there were like these big exciting commercials with big fonts, and they were like, watch these trains, watch that train, look at this kid enjoy that fucking train, dumbass, stupid motherfucker. There was like sort of like a paradigm shift with this channel somewhere, I don't know, 5 to 4 years ago, where it just suddenly shifted gears into like, yes, it was showing real life like railroad signs and stuff, but then it started having like quirky effects like lasers shooting out and like, you know, weird visual things happening that were more, I guess, stimulating for kids is probably what they thought. But then they just straight up went to like nightmare stuff. Like, look at this shit. Why? This is like straight up psychedelic. It actually reminds me of this cool animator named Syak, who does some crazy wacky animations that are really, really well done and super, super cerebral. He used to actually have these animations up on Adult Swim's bumpers, and they were extremely crazy to look at, and I'm sure many of you are familiar with this stuff if you're familiar with Adult Swim, or really if you're just into internet culture as a whole, as I think his stuff has been seen by millions of people by now. Okay, wait, I just looked it up. He has a video that has over 158 million views. Like, a lot of his videos are above 50 million views. That's nuts. I actually didn't know his videos were viewed that many times, but it makes sense. They're addicting to watch, as are, I guess, in some morbid way, these Pentamax videos, as they also have about 60 million views too. Now granted, some of these are the calming, less crazy ones that also have a lot more views, but this channel does not fail to get like over 1 million per video. I know maybe it's kind of silly to say, but on a more like serious note, it makes me kind of wonder how this kind of develops a child's growing brain. Like genuinely, brain rot is somewhat of a hot topic nowadays, with people speaking out about how like this sort of shit like can really ruin how you learn and how you socialize with people, with stuff like TikTok and YouTube Shorts being far more watched than normal content on YouTube usually is. It makes you kind of worry that kids aren't really learning or maybe even developing the right way with the kind of stuff that they watch, if this is the kind of stuff that they watch. Kind of reminds me how like when I was a kid, I used to watch pretty calming stuff on Nickelodeon or Cartoon Network. Not really stuff like Tom and Jerry, mind you. I'm just talking about like, I don't know, like Macy, you know, that little cute rat that just like played and just like had sound effects. It was just cute. Or like Oswald, or just like any sort of like preschooler shows from back then. I'm not saying all of them are great. No, not at all. Some of them were definitely slop and were terrible. But there were just many moments where I remember being calm watching some of these shows and just having a moment of silence and just enjoying the environment that these shows had. And now it just seems like this is the norm. But it makes me wonder how much people actually like it though. I remember 2 years ago I covered this one channel that had just a bunch of Samsung balls repeated over and over again with some filters here and there overlaid, and they weren't really that special, but I had many people email me and tell me that this is something that neurodivergent people watch, or young kids who have autism. I still get emails to this day talking about these Samsung balls and how people's little cousins watch those kinds of videos just because it's engaging to them. Now, I'm not going to sit here and say that I completely understand how that's engaging for certain people, but I'm sure for a lot of people, they see something like this and they're fascinated. And I'm not gonna lie, it is very interesting and very fascinating to watch, but sometimes I also question if this really is done with a good intent in mind. Because, well, keep in mind, kids content is usually the moneymaker for a lot of these kind of scummier channels that just sort of content farm this sort of stuff for any child to watch, you know, on their auto playlist and junk. And it might be a little bit more leaning on wanting to gain as much engagement as possible than it is about, I don't know, stimulating kids, because honestly, some of this is overstimulating even for me. Like, there's so much noise, so much color, so many edits, so many like scary imagery. There's skulls in some of these, okay? Like, I don't see how that's engaging. I think some kids would be terrified by this. Hell, I'll be real, I would have been terrified by this. I mean, I'll acknowledge this every single time that I can. I was kind of a pussy when I was a kid. I was really scared of a lot of things, which is why I love horror to this day, because I cherish the feeling of horror and fear in my heart that I still have. And when I see stuff like this and I think back to myself as a kid, yeah, maybe it was a different environment, maybe it was a different time, but this is not the sort of things I would be watching. More so than that, I'm also fascinated by the idea that somehow, some way, someone is making these videos just for the sake of maybe getting some engagement from kids or anyone really. And these videos clearly take quite a lot of effort. I mean, the last one that was made was about 3 months ago, and before that was like 7 or 6 months ago. It was pretty far off. So it's not like this is a content farm. This guy is actually making stuff that he feels is engaging enough for, I guess, kids. Although now that I've looked at some of these videos, not all of them have the kids content label. So has this person moved on? Is it possible for kids to watch this sort of content even without the kids label? I'm not sure if there's like a policy update on that, but for some reason, people keep moving back to these videos. It likely has to do with a bunch of the buzzwords and the keywords that are used in the title and the thumbnails and just like word of mouth, honestly. But I wouldn't doubt if a lot of these are still being watched by kids, not just adults. I mean, I found this on Twitter. I wouldn't be surprised if the general audience watching this now is just adults who are morbidly curious by the strange edits, even though they can be kind of a lot. But hey, credit where credit is due. As a fan of horror, this is very well done and very spooky and weird. And I guess there is an audience for this, because if you look at the comments, there's a lot of people from all over speaking different languages and requesting different countries to be featured. I guess their railroad signs are that interesting that they want them to be featured. I guess people really like this stuff, but it's just still weird. It's strange, and I'm sorry I'm not adding much to the conversation, but this is just that. Weird, strange, off-putting, and kind of scary.